Comparing Math and Spirit, written August 20th, 2020. In the basic forms of math introduced to children in elementary school, only numbers are used. So-called variable integers, represented by letters, are not typically introduced until higher grade levels. However, children feel very advanced when they can not only do addition but also multiplication and even division. They start from a basis of having to learn what a number even is and how to count, so elementary math seems very advanced to them in comparison. However, as math becomes more advanced, integers called variables are introduced in the form of letters. To an elementary student, it is totally nonsensical to see the equation A plus B equals C. They know without any doubt that you cannot add letters together to get another letter. To them, when you add letters together, they make a word, not a math equation. What they do not realize is that the letters in the math equation are simply symbols that stand for something else. Therefore, the letters are much more versatile and more can be accomplished in math with symbolic integers than regular set numbers. Having letters as symbols makes math more complex, but it also exponentially expands the capabilities of math. The more advanced math becomes, the more symbols are used, and the more things math can be used to do. This example in the progression of math parallels the natural and the spiritual. To natural people, natural realities are all there is. Just like an elementary school student only has numbers to work math equations and can only make sense out of numbers, a natural person can only make sense out of natural realities. On the other hand, spiritual people see natural things largely as symbolic of what is going on in the spiritual. This is why God says we can look at creation and see Him. It is also why Jesus used wind to describe the Holy Spirit. It is also why the events of the Old Testament, such as the flood of Noah or the walls of Jericho or the exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt, all represent spiritual realities for the church today. Whenever we begin to see the natural as shadows of the spiritual, we begin to expand our capacity. We are able to better operate in the spiritual rather than being restricted to only natural dealings and things. Many people will live and die and never understand or use variable integers in math, which is of little consequence. However, of greater consequence, many people live and die and never engage in the spiritual aspects of the world either. They are so naturally minded, even when the spiritual is explained or demonstrated to them even, it seems nonsensical. They don't grasp it because the spiritual does not work like the natural. This is seen in John 3:1-14, when Jesus explains to Nicodemus, a good man and a teacher in Israel, that a person must be born again. In spite of his intelligence and extensive religious education, Nicodemus could not understand spiritual rebirth. Therefore, he wondered if a person could return to their mother's womb and then be born again naturally. All of Jesus' words are spiritual, and therefore they go over the head of those who interpret them in literal, natural terms. When Jesus' words were interpreted through the natural mind of Nicodemus, the conclusion truly was nonsensical and absurd. However, when the words of Jesus are interpreted in spiritual terms by a spiritually enlightened mind, being born again is the most basic spiritual concept of a Christian. Even children grasp the concept of being born again enough to give their lives to God at very young ages. Spiritual things are not necessarily complicated. It's just that we've been so inundated with natural training that they are totally counterintuitive. This hinders our spiritual advancement. The advantage of children is that they know that there's much they don't understand, and therefore they are willing to take whatever is presented to them on faith without having to understand how it works. This naivety obviously makes them easy to deceive, but it also makes them easy to receive things of the spiritual. People are trained from childhood that maturity is the ability to scrutinize things with the natural mind, but spiritual things must be discerned through revelation. It's not a work of man. We don't understand them by thinking hard or study. We receive understanding of spiritual things by seeking the Lord and submitting ourselves to Him in order that He can enlighten us. As we are enlightened, we begin to realize that the spiritual does not disregard the natural any more than letter-based integers disregard the principles of basic addition. Letter-based integers operate in the same realm as set numbers, but they represent a higher understanding of how the realm of math works. In the same way, the manifestations of the spiritual, such as the receiving or performance of a miracle or receiving spiritual insights, operates in the realm of the natural, but it works on a higher plane. In some ways, the spiritual is more complex than the natural because of how powerful it is, but in many ways, it's more simple than the natural. Understanding the spiritual does not take a high IQ. It takes simplicity of faith. The natural system is founded on human ability and force. The spiritual is a system founded on trust. A person can go much further believing in God to do a thing than they can believing in their own ability to work hard or think insightfully. The most fundamental principle of the spiritual is this: who and what do we believe in our spirit? Everything else hinges on this one principle. It is as fundamental in the spiritual as 1 + 1 = 2 is in math. If we believe God, we will seek God in prayer, read His Word, and obey Him. On the other hand, if we primarily believe worldly input, which is Satan-inspired rather than God-inspired, we will primarily seek the help of man, natural success principles, and even Satan himself. We automatically take action based on who and what we believe in most. Therefore, what we believe is very evident by our actions. Who and what we count on becomes especially clear in pressing situations. Whoever's presence and help we seek the most is who we believe in the most.